Hey, welcome back into the podcast. Today we are talking about the number one mistake investors, real estate investors to be specific, are making when buying rental properties. So we're back here with Jason Morris. Jason, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
He's been in before. We talked about trust. Check out our trust video. If you don't have a trust, more important than an LLC, probably check that out. And you're with Woodburn and Wedge, correct?
Yes.
And a local attorney place in town. Tell us a little about yourself and what's your specialty.
Yeah, so I'm a local kid, born and raised here in Reno. Attended Galena High School. Went away to school at BYU. Have a master's in accounting with a law degree. And so I have a tax background to go along with the legal side, which has been very helpful in the estate planning context.
Yep. So you know about rentals too, so that's great.
Yeah.
So, but he's not a licensed CPA, correct?
Correct.
And neither am I. So obviously, the first thing you want to do is talk to a CPA before you buy a rental. But this show right now is talking about how to protect your assets and make sure that there's not a certain event at a rental property that can impact you personally. So that's where we're going to go today. You ready?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to do rapid fire. We have about 6 questions, in-depth interview here. So first of all, what is an LLC and how does it protect somebody?
Yeah, so LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. And as the name states, you are attempting and should successfully limit your personal liability such that if something goes wrong within an asset that's owned within that LLC, you're not going to have personal exposure or personal liability.
Okay, so basically it's an instrument that you can title your rental property in, correct? And that you actually, it's an organization that owns the property and you are no longer personally on the title, correct?
Yes, so I should have clarified that an LLC is a business entity. And so it is a formal business that is filed with the state and does require certain formalities to be followed in order to avail yourself of the protections that are possible with the LLC.
That's a really good point. When you come in and talk to Jason or someone about it, make sure you're following all the rules because you don't want to pierce the veil if you're not following the rules of the LLC, like having meetings and following the guidelines. So,
Yes.
all right, so we got a lot of people out there that own rentals. A lot of our clients buy rentals. This is kind of like the trust. Why don't people put their real estate assets into an LLC? And the number one thing I get is, we're just going to put a $1 million umbrella policy on the property, keep it in our personal name, and not deal with the hassle of doing an LLC. Why is that a bad idea?
Well, it's a bad idea because an LLC can prevent almost the entire liability, whereas the umbrella policy we think is a great tool, but it does mean that that carrier could potentially be paying out $1 million if, for example, that is your coverage limit. With an LLC, it can provide a great deterrent from someone coming in and making a claim at all. If I'm a plaintiff's attorney, which I'm not, and I see a property is owned in an LLC, I'm going to be much less excited, encouraged, anxious to go after the property owner because an LLC is a strong fortification, a strong protection around the assets owned therein, and it also protects the ultimate beneficial owner of that LLC. So an LLC has a huge deterrent effect, whereas an umbrella policy, that's just a pot of gold or a pot of money that's waiting to be had by a potential claimant.
Okay. Now, so if someone has, let's just say that someone's watching this video and they're like, wow, we're making a mistake. We want to protect our personal assets and not open that up to someone that has a problem. So my question to you is, have you seen or can you tell our audience what are some of the things that could go bad at a rental property that could cause someone to come after you? I guess because people don't know. I've heard horror stories, but can you give us a few examples that you've seen or heard about?
Yeah, so knock on wood, we haven't had the really awful scenario unfold within our office, at least within my clients. But you can have a simple slip and fall on your property. Suppose your tenant is hosting a party. Things get a little out of control. Someone is seriously injured, whether that's through the negligence of your tenant or through their wild behavior.
Or snow shoveling.
Yes.
A simple snow shoveling.
Yeah, simple as like a slip and fall on the ice out front. All that could lead to liability to a property that's personally owned or individually owned by the property owner. With an LLC, at most, the assets contained within the LLC, i.e., the property, could be exposed. But even then, like I said, it's going to be a great deterrent from anyone coming in and trying to make a claim against that LLC owner.
So it limits your liability. I mean, that's what a limited liability company is it limits your exposure personally, correct?
Yes.
Because it's in the name of it. So what is before? Actually, I want to talk about this real quick. Is there's different LLCs out there. So I know that more sophisticated investors I've come across, some builders have what's called a Series LLC. First of all, what is a Series LLC and how is it different from a normal LLC, and why should people consider it?
Yes.
Or when should people consider it, and what?
Yeah, so a Series LLC is a creature of statute, meaning Nevada law allows for this, and there's about 15 other states that have allowed this.
Well, not too many.
Yeah, so we're one of the few, I would say. A Series LLC is effectively like having a parent with a number of subsidiaries underneath. All of those comprise an entire series, but each individual node or subsidiary underneath can be its own self-contained LLC. A couple of the beauties of it is, one, you should be able to segregate out your liability within each series. So suppose you have 3 properties, let's call it Apple Street, Main Street, and Center Street. Suppose the tenant in Apple Street turns out to be a drug dealer. They intentionally harm someone on the property. Well, at most, the assets of the Apple series would be subject to liability, while Center and Main Street are going to be protected and exempt from any claims. Another big virtue that our clients see is you only pay one Secretary of State filing fee. And so with most LLCs, you're going to have, well, every LLC, you're going to have state filing fees. With a Series LLC, you can pay one of those fees, but derive the benefit of having multiple LLCs, because each of your properties or assets would be owned in one of those subsidiaries and self-contained from any exposure or liability.
So what you're saying, to be clear, is if you just have a normal LLC and you have 10 rental houses underneath there, and because I know a lot of people who have different LLCs for every property, which can get expensive, and filing fees, I think it's $300 to $400 for the business license. You have to get a business license when you have an LLC with the state. Correct. And register and get your managers. So what you're saying though is if somebody has 10 rental houses under one LLC and it's not series, all those are open potentially if you have a problem at one of them, correct?
Absolutely. So that is the fatal flaw in having multiple properties under one LLC, is if you have a bad actor in one of those properties, it could be the domino that causes all of those properties to fall, insofar as the entire LLC's assets would be at risk if you're found liable or negligent in some way for just one of those properties.
Right. So, and then the other thing we encourage, 2 other tips out there. We just talked to a insurance agent, so make sure you take a look at that video up there. Is you may want to have your tenants get a tenant policy with some liability. Is that a good idea?
Sure.
And that way, if something happens, that their policy will kick in. And then, so consider that. And then you might also want to get, because as an LLC, you can get an umbrella policy on top of it, correct?
Yeah, so as the owner of the LLC, you can obtain an umbrella policy, which does provide a great level of protection across all of your assets.
Pretty inexpensive, too. They're pretty inexpensive. Check out that video. What is the cost difference? So we have the regular LLC, and then we have a Series LLC. Is there a cost difference with those?
Yes, there is. So typically for an LLC formation, between the Secretary of State costs and our fees, we're somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,400 range. And then you're probably about double that amount for a Series LLC. The Series LLC is considerably more work, hence the higher cost.
Now I see some of the investors we work with, they actually have their bank account in a Series LLC. So one of the series can be the bank account, correct?
In fact, yes, for Series LLC to be valid, each subsidiary or series underneath the parent should have its own bank account. That is crucial.
Okay. Yeah. So make sure that you don't have one account where it's all going in. And then what about credit cards? Do they need to be segregated, or is that getting?
Yeah, that's less crucial. The credit card is probably not as crucial as so much as those separate individual bank accounts.
And the biggest thing, it's just like a trust. You gotta follow. You gotta get funded. You gotta make sure that you are following all the rules, because you don't want to. What's it called? Pierce the corporate veil. Is that correct?
That's right. Piercing the corporate veil would mean that you become personally liable. So you may have an LLC. If you're not following the rules, if you're not following the formalities, you could still be held liable, and your personal assets could be exposed. And that is something that we never want to see.
Okay, so if people are out there now saying, "Wow, I should think about this LLC. I have 10 properties." Is it similar to a trust? They got to come see you, then you spell out what houses you want, and then you'll help them go through the process of getting all these titled correctly?
Absolutely, yes. We'll certainly help clients in the creation of an LLC, as well as the titling of assets to assure that the LLC can carry out its intended purpose.
And one of the things that you want to be careful of, because a lot of people go online and find an LLC, be careful doing that, particularly if you are transferring a house that is in your personal name into an LLC. You need to make sure that you do your due diligence and make sure that there's not a clause that causes your if you have a mortgage, come due. It has never been in the last 10 years a problem because interest rates have been low. But if you have a 2 or 3% interest rate and you decide to switch it and there's a clause that causes it to come due, now you're scrambling at 6 or 7%. So, I don't think banks were ever considering it for the last 10 years because rates have been 2 or 3%, but now it's different. Make sure you're taking a look at that and talk to an expert. That's what this is all about. Anything else that any other pro tips that people should think about?
Yeah, so if you have an LLC, it's only as good as its funding, much like a trust.
Okay.
If you have an LLC, but your properties aren't titled in the LLC, you don't have a bank account from which you're using the proceeds from rent or paying out expenses, it's really of no benefit or use. To the extent you have the LLC, property must be titled therein, and you must conduct the transactions within the LLC accounts.
You can't mix accounts with personal accounts, or that's just going to cause
You
more problems than it's worth, right?
You can do that. Just know that it means the LLC is not going to function.
Now, I'm going to ask one question at the end because I came across it. One of my clients had his primary residence in an LLC.
We see that, and that is
Why is that good, bad, or indifferent?
It's so bad. You never put a primary residence in an LLC because you lose out on several important benefits. Number one, you lose out on the homestead exemption. Nevada actually has a fairly liberal homestead exemption.
What is it, $615?
$550,000
Okay.
in equity in your primary residence. You also lose out on the Section 121 gain exclusion.
Oh.
So you can sell your home and avoid paying capital gains up to $500,000 for married filing
As
jointly.
of today. I mean, that can change. There's always discussion, but
Yeah.
as of today. So you don't get that if something happens to you. You don't get the stepped up. Do you get the stepped up cost basis if something happens to you?
Well, that's the other risk, is you're jeopardizing that ability to get a step up. So for gain exclusion, step up, homestead forfeiture, there are just a number of reasons not to do that. Not the least of which is, as your primary residence, that's a personal asset. Personal use assets should not be part of an LLC or a business entity.
That was a great final question to wrap it up. So, well, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
What's your number? How do they get a hold of you? So you do trusts, you do asset protection, essentially across the board. That's your expertise.
Yes.
So if you want a trust, if you want an LLC, get in and get both of them done simultaneously. That always makes it easier and make sure that they're all correctly done. So
Yes.
how do they contact you?
Yeah, you can reach me through our main office line at 775-688-3000.
All right. Continue to like our videos. We love comments. We always get back to everyone that puts a comment on any of our social media platforms. If you have a topic in real estate, asset protection, or whatever that falls under real estate, we'd love to hear from you, and we can do a video on it. So Till next time, you guys enjoy, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.